Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for The Boys, Season 2, Episode 5. We gotta go now. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of The Boys. So I have to start with a spoiler warning for The Boys up to Season 2, Episode 5. If you haven't seen up to this point, you will not want to watch this video. Otherwise, some things will be spoiled for you. So, this is a decent episode. I liked it. I thought it was pretty good. It was more of a setup episode. It's more of that I'm hoping that it will lead to something really good later in the season, and that the season is sort of taking its time to set the tone, which there's nothing wrong with. In fact, some shows that speed through their plots too fast tend not to be very good. And you can really get the sense in this episode that they are setting the tone and they are setting things up, but that's not to say that nothing happened in this episode. There was a lot of interesting things, interesting character beats that happened in this episode as well. So let's get into that. Let's start with the Billy Butcher stuff, which I think is probably the main thrust of this episode. Where this is it's a stereotypical type of episode, but it's one that is definitely needed, where Billy Butcher is sort of moping the whole episode because after last week's episode he got rejected by Becca, which is a huge blow for him because he spent so many years of his life looking for her, or trying to avenge her killer, and then finds out she's still alive. And when he finally goes to reunite with her and to get her, it doesn't work out. Because her child is standing in the way because she loves her child and he's not really doesn't share those affections, shall we say, and so things fell apart between them. So I think it makes all the sense in the world that he would be sort of lose all hope and get depressed and think, well, what the hell what is the reason? Why would I continue on? What's the reason to keep on going? Because his reason for keep on going kind of blew up on him. More than that, part of the reason why she rejected him was because of who he was, because of his vindictive nature and his desire for revenge that has driven his life for the past several years, and that's part of the main component of why he was rejected. So he's got to be feeling pretty miserable, so it makes sense to have an episode, and that's something that's a typical format that a lot of shows would do where a big event like that happens, where they have an episode where the hero or the character loses faith in oneself and loses all hope and is completely hopeless, and by the end of the episode he regains that faith. Now, it is a typical format, but I think it's absolutely necessary, and had they kind of glossed over this, it would have been much worse. I think you absolutely needed this character beat for Billy Butcher, and I think the way it was done and the way they involved other characters like Huey and Mother's Milk actually worked really well to reaffirm their faith in him and their friendship and their willing to stick up for him. You got the scene at the start of the episode where Billy Butcher went to a punk rock club and started a random fight with random people and got his ass kicked, and you got the sense that that's what he wanted. He wanted to get his ass kicked. He was the masochist, and then he went to visit his aunt, and because he was planning on basically ending it. He just saw no reason to keep on living. And it's funny that he called Huey and said he was running away to Argentina, I believe he said. And it's funny that Huey immediately found that something was wrong because he was being nice to him. And it's funny when he had Mother's Milk, it was like, oh, wait, Mother's Milk was completely uninterested when Huey was concerned. It's like, oh, what makes you think something's wrong? And he's like, well, he was being nice to me. And as soon as he said that, he was like, oh, he shut up and was like, tell me everything. Which I think is kind of funny. And of course it does go a lot in Billy Butcher's sort of character. Now, this also continues off of last week when we saw that Black Noir was hunting Billy Butcher. And we do see that he actually does, in fact, catch up to him in this episode. And that they know that it wasn't Huey or Mother's Milk's fault, that it was Black Nar was hunting Butcher, tracking him ever since he went and visited Becca. And so you have that show off where they have this impossible showdown. Now they're setting off all these Home Alone bombs. And I think maybe they're just not aware that that shit is not going to work on Black Nar. Like, we know this because in the opening scene of the season, we saw that terrorist with superpowers who has the ability to blow himself up to this huge explosion, and Black Nar survived that. So if he can survive that, he can survive a couple of Home Alone homemade bombs, and that's going to be nothing for him. And especially like Mother's Milk and Huey shooting at him, also going to be nothing. So I was generally I was surprised. I was perplexed. I was confused onto how, in fact, he would get out of this situation, because it does seem like a no-win scenario. It seems like there was absolutely no way out. And when Huey and Mother's Milk show up to shoot at him, I knew that it was not going to help. But it did help in the sense that it gave Billy Butcher purpose. It gave him a reason to show that people still cared about him. And so it gave him something to stick up for. So he blackmailed them with these pictures. And it's funny, when Huey asked, "Do you really have these pictures?" he says, "Of course I do." I don't know. Is he being sarcastic when he says, "Of course I do"? Is he being serious? Does he perhaps have the pictures but not like on a cloud ready to be leaked if he dies? Like, I kind of doubt it, honestly. But I don't know. I don't know if we're actually meant to take him at his word, because I kind of don't. But anyway, that was a really cool scene. It's also interesting to note that Gus Fring, I can't remember his name. I'm just going to call him Gus Fring. But that he is kind of tracking all the superheroes, that they have their own personal cams, kind of like the cop cams. And it almost seems like in this scene that Black Nar was like his personal hitman, that he had sent Black Nar out to kill Billy Butcher. At the very least, he was aware that Black Nar was on the quest to kill Billy Butcher and fully supported it. And so he was basically watching them the whole time, because as soon as Billy Butcher mentions the photos, he calls Black Nar up immediately. So this does seem like a personal mission that he sent him on. Now, there's a lot more sort of theories and whatnot going on with Gus Fring. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name. But with this character and conspiracy theories on what he's up to, that he is up to a greater plan. That's something involving Stormfront. And perhaps getting rid of Billy Butcher was part of that plan, but having all that photos leaks would have ruined the plan somehow. So he was willing to just let that part go, or maybe it wasn't part of the plan. Maybe it was just an extra bonus that he was doing, just so that Billy Butcher couldn't interfere with his plans anymore. But he, for whatever reason, he decided that the damage those photos could do would not be worth killing Billy Butcher over. Now, that's very possible, though, if Billy Butcher keeps interfering and causing trouble, that he may change his mind on that and decide that he'd rather just deal with the blowback of the photos, that because Billy Butcher's causing him too much trouble. So that is a looming danger, in that they have these huge, indestructible, virtually impossible to beat superheroes at his disposable, that makes him extremely dangerous man. Now, of course, as I said, Billy Butcher gets his groove back by the end of the episode, which makes sense, and he swears to his dog that he's going to promise to bring his mom home, which is referring to Becca, of course. So he has gotten a new sense of hope, which is exactly what needed to happen for this character and the storyline. So that all works out and that all makes sense. So now let's talk about the whole storyline with the Seven, where they're filming a movie, this is very funny. Of course, there's a lot of satire here against the MCU. I think they called the VCU in here, and also DC movies. I almost feel like they're poking more fun at DC movies because they're actually worse. And the dawn, what do they call it? The dawn of something, but it's obviously a play of the dawn of justice, which is the Justice League movie. and I talked about last week when Maeve was outed that I was surprised that the vault wouldn't just play it up. But that's exactly what they do in this episode, that they play it up and add their media spiel to it, and just exactly like I thought they would. And the lines in the movie were so unnatural. It's like, oh, because I'm gay too. And it was really poking fun of that. And they had the scene where the girls get it done, where all the female members team up, which obviously poking fun at the Avengers Endgame team up with all the female superheroes. But here's the thing, so this makes sense, but so this explains it more, as in season 1 I was really unsure of why Maeve was so hesitant to come public, but it turns out it didn't have so much to do with her sexuality as the fact that it has to do with Homelander. And even now, she knows that Homelander is fucking with her, which there's part of me that wonders that maybe she's just being a little too paranoid, that maybe Homelander just doesn't give a fuck anymore, and that's why he's doing that. But she's still, like, deadpan certain that Homelander is fucking with her, and that she's still very much in danger, and that her girlfriend is very much in danger, so much so that she tells her girlfriend to go along with all this bullshit. Because she's in danger from Homelander. And so this ends up with Maeve teaming up with the Deep, and I gotta admit, they had that whole commercial with the Deep. Like, that kind of makes sense, though, the way you'd have a commercial where he'd be like, "Hey, stop that," or whatever, because he's trying to propaganda to paint himself in a positive light now. But Maeve teaming up with the Deep, I gotta admit, I actually find that interesting, because I've been very critical of the Deep so far. I hate his storyline. I just wish they'd get rid of this character. But this is an interesting concept to me, and so I think this may be a way to make this character interesting again, to bring him back in the fold. I, of course, don't have no idea what Maeve has in mind, but it's very interesting that she said to her girlfriend that she wanted to take Homelander down, which is a very interesting prospect, because that could potentially put her interests allied with someone like Starlight or the boys. So there's some really interesting storytelling potentials there. Speaking of Starlight, we got more of her. She's, of course, being very standoffish to Stormfront because she learned what she learned about her in the previous episode. And Stormfront is picking up on the vibe that something's wrong. But then Stormfront, of course, has also picked up on that Starlight had leaked the information about Compound V. Now, I honestly believe that Stormfront isn't aware of the extent that Starlight's involved. Like, I don't think she's aware of the extent she's involved with Huey or the boys or any of that. I just think that she feels Starlight's just doing it to spite her mother, which is why Stormfront was talking to her mother. And why it had pissed Starlight off so much. And of course, Starlight went snooping around in Stormfront's trailer for more information and was finding out more about her, but got interrupted, so she used the "why the hell are you talking to my mother" as a cover, which is a pretty good cover, and I think for the most part Stormfront bought it, but she didn't buy that Starlight. So I don't think she's aware that Starlight knows more. But then, of course, when Stormfront threatened to go public with the fact that Starlight leaked the information, that's when Starlight kind of tipped her hand a bit out of necessity and revealed that she knew more about Stormfront. So now Stormfront must be aware that Starlight is digging into her past, and there's a lot more going on with Stormfront. But what's really interesting about this scene is the way that Stormfront says, you're going to be very useful to me. And again, this really hints that there's an underlining plot that Stormfront and Gus Fring, that Stormfront and Vault are involved with, that they're going to use Starlight in ways that she would not do intentionally. So that's very sinister, and I think that's something is going to come of that shortly. And of course, I think part of the plan of using people also includes Homelander, who... Now, Homelander plot was very interesting because it starts with his... he has this tape of him murdering this man leaked because someone filled it on a cell phone, and it caused controversy. And to be perfectly honest, I think this is really realistic. I think it was unrealistic up to this point how easily the Seven, in the earlier episode when Stormfront just destroyed a whole apartment complex and killed a bunch of innocent bystanders for no reason, that nobody caught sight of that in the age of modern technology where everyone films everyone. So I actually found it a bit unrealistic that the Seven were able to get away with all their murdering and whatnot. I mean, season 1 covered this a bit where the thing with A-Train killing Robin, they covered it under the carpet with money and all that. But that only takes you so far, especially as in the age of modern technology when anyone can film anyone. So I'm actually surprised that it took this long for cell phone footage like that to come to light. And I have an idea. I haven't read the comics, but I have an idea that this actually was not in the comics, and that the comics was sort of playing more fast and loose. And because it did, I do believe it came out a few years earlier, like a decade earlier, so maybe a bit out of date, even with modern times, with modern technology. I would find it really hard for the Seven to get away with all the shit that they do. So that was a very, I thought, good story plot that made a lot of sense, and Homelander started losing some popularity. I love the scene where they have a politician who's a very obvious stand-in for AOC, leading this protest against Homelander, and Homelander shows up and lights everyone on fire and kills everyone with his laser beams. And you know what? I'm a sucker. I totally bought that. I thought that was actually happening, and I was like, holy shit! And then when they revealed it was just a dream, I was like, oh God, you got me. The reason why you got me, because it is something that he would totally do. In fact, I find it almost more believable that he would kill all those people than he'd be able to restrain himself, because that's the way he's been portrayed on this show so far, as a sociopathic mass murderer who just cannot contain himself. Of course, what does make me buy it is that he's all about his image, and doing so would completely torch and destroy his image. So I can buy he was able to restrain himself in that regard, because it was a totally public setting, and it would make things 10 times worse. But I love how what's her face, Ashley, and Gus Fring totally didn't want Homelander to say anything about it, and this is why, and he just defied them and did whatever he wanted. So I have a feeling that there will be some repercussions for him for doing that. But then, of course, you got he turned to Stormfront for help in getting his popularity back by using her memes. And of course, again, there's a lot of loaded social commentary here about all the Russian memes and all the memes that your uncle will post about Trump and whatnot that are total bullshit, and they're just there to sway public opinion. They have no basis in reality whatsoever, but they're just a tool to shape public opinion, and that's exactly what Stormfront uses from, and Homelander takes advantage of that, and it works for him, and he gets the which I thought was pretty funny. And then of course the episode ends with Homelander and Stormfront getting it on, which I must admit, I saw a preview of a clip of Homelander lasering Stormfront, and I mistook that they were fighting, but they're not fighting, they're fucking. and it does show how powerful she is, that she's able to absorb that energy that would kill a normal person, and she does it as a kink. And it also shows just how fucked up she is, and so she's a perfect match for Homelander because he's really fucked up as well. So it was a very, very fucked up scene. Of course, typical of what The Boys does. So, like it. I guess I'll touch briefly on A-Train. I thought the scene with him was kind of funny where he tried to rewrite his dialogue. And usually that director they played as a really sleazy moralist director, but I kind of actually had sympathy for him in dealing with a stuck-up, arrogant actor who wanted to change his lines. Although, I don't know if I get that all the superheroes would play their own part. Shouldn't they have other actors play them? I don't know. That's just what I'm thinking. But regardless, let me end this off by talking about Kamiko and Frenchy. I actually really like the scenes of these two. I do feel these really help flesh out these characters and give me a bigger handle. In fact, Kamiko's storyline was very similar to Billy Butcher's this episode, that it was her sort of mopey episode, her turn to let the events of the previous episodes, and in this case, the death of her brother, really send her in the downward spiral. In this case, rather than becoming suicidal, she becomes homicidal, and she decides to become a murder for hire, basically. And that Frenchie's fuck buddy is the one who's using, because Frenchie went and confided all these things to her about Kamiko, and she used that to make some cash. So she's not the most moral person in the world either. And Frenchie sort of implores her not to go down this dark path, but Kamiko just pushes him away and yells at him, or proverbially yells at him in her sign language, which of course he doesn't understand, so he has no idea what she's saying, but she can tell that she's angry and that she's rejecting him, so eventually he just says, fuck this and fuck you, and walks off. And I think this is a very interesting relationship, because Frenchie really does care about her, that it's not just about his own getting his rocks off or his own lust, that he actually cares about Kamiko, and I think Kamiko's starting to see that. So I really hope to get more development in this storyline as well, which I also think is very interesting. So my rating for this latest episode of The Boys out of 10, I'm gonna give this an 8. Extremely good. I thought this is mostly a setup episode, but it was a good one. It was a well-rounded one. Great character moments, some funny moments, of course, with the satire about the movie making. And even though it is kind of tropey with the Billy Butcher's and Kamiko's, especially Billy Butcher's, path in this episode was really formulaic, but it was necessary, and I think it made sense for the characters and it made sense for the story, and it's setting up for some really interesting places that I hope that the show's going to go towards the end of the season as we get into this back half of the season, the last 3 episodes actually. So I think they're setting up for something great. So I really hope that the show doesn't let me down on this one. So anyway, that is it for my review of the latest episode of The Boys. I may have an announcement to make. I will be appearing on Fans of The Boys, which is a YouTube show, live stream, which will be over on Darren's channel. If you are familiar with my channel, you probably know Darren. I've done a lot of videos with him before. We'll be doing I'll be guest starring on D's Reviews, where he does Fans of The Boys with Don, Willie, and Rob from Smirking Gun Reviews. So I'll be over there with those 3 talking about this episode. I'll put a link up in the description below as soon as I have one, so be sure to check that out. Also, check out my channel as I continue to cover every episode of The Boys Season 2, as well as covering other shows like Lower Decks, mini Star Trek shows, BoJack Horseman, The Expanse, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.